Hey out there, we're back again with the Rock and Larry show, and we are ready to rock and roll on that travesty last night that passed for a town hall in Philadelphia, where our nation began. It was moderated by George Stephanopoulos of ABC, and of course, the person on the spot there supposedly was Joe Biden, who is running for president of the United States. And I have to say this right off Rack of Rack Attack Gamer YouTube channel, who's with us on the line again here tonight. I have to say right off the bat that this was really a travesty, and George Stephanopoulos should be ashamed of himself for the way he gave Biden passes on crucial questions and not at all asking the question about the New York Post story that is revealing allegedly uh, undisclosed connections between Biden, his son, and an official of Burisma, where Biden's son was sitting on a board. All this is coming out. It's been already suppressed on YouTube and Twitter, but New York Post has been carrying it. Other places have been getting it out. But no question at all about that. What's the justification for that? Huge story, very important to learn what happened, to ask Biden, is it true or not? At least ask him that. Silence, crickets from Stephanopoulos. What do you think?
It was all softball. I mean, all the questions were softball. They appear to be rehearsed to me. He seems to have some answers that are lengthy, that say a whole bunch of words, but don't really say very much meaning for his answers. George could have brought along a pacifier and a bib, for Joe and kind of coddled him a little bit, put some slippers on, give him a smoking pipe or whatever.
Well, talk about it being rigged. The questions from the audience. There were at least two participants that were not just disinterested voters. What they were political operatives, which was not disclosed by Stephanopoulos. One guy that was introduced as a communications professional, his name was Nathan Osborne. Well, he actually turns out to be a 2008 Obama Biden press aide, and he had a number of positions in the Obama Biden administration, but that was not disclosed. Then there was a woman, Miki Hank, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and she was introduced as a physical therapist, but undisclosed was the fact that her husband ran for a state Senate position in Pennsylvania against a Republican state Senate Majority Leader, Jake Corman. So, I think that detail would have put some perspective on who these parties were who were being just presented as, well, just ordinary voters, might be leaning one way or the other, undecided. Hidden was the agenda behind them. I mean, this is how ridiculous and what a travesty this whole thing was.
The hardest hardball thing that came out of anybody's mouth that night was the black man that asked Biden about you ain't black. Or actually, he just mentioned it. It wasn't really a question. He just mentioned the you ain't black from Biden.
He started out that way to make it appear, I think, that he was playing hardball, but Biden was allowed to answer any way he wanted without being pressed by anything. Also, again, he refused to answer the question of whether he will pack the court, and he gave some very evasive answers that Stephanopoulos should have stepped on. Stephanopoulos injected a few things for clarification, but then let it go and went on. I mean, Biden ended up saying that it depends on how they handle this, whether he's going to tell the voters before the election, which is already underway, before the election, whether he's going to make a move to pack the Supreme Courts. I mean, the whole thing was absurd. And how the media has gotten to this point, and how reporters like Stephanopoulos, alleged reporters, are able to carry out in this way, shows the sad state of American journalism at this point. It's a big disservice to the public, because most of the public now gets their information from TV networks and cable networks. Newspapers are going the way of the dinosaurs more and more. So this is their main source of information, and this was like a non-information session. No excuse for it.
Well, like I said from the beginning, that Biden, when he did finally answer questions, He would say a lot of words, and they would have very little meaning behind them. That's my biggest take out of the whole thing. He would talk and talk and talk, and he would use all sorts of different words, but the
Yeah.
meaning was not really there.
Well, another thing that he wasn't pressed on by Stephanopoulos was about his reversal on fracking. I mean, he's on tape saying that he was going to ban fracking along with his running mate, Kamala Harris. And he said again, he's not against fracking. And that was another thing that was let go. And he went on and on about that. I mean, one thing after another, the whole thing was absurd. Now, in contrast, to just show you how rigged the media is this day, Samantha Guthrie at the same time same airtime was interviewing at a town hall for President Trump for NBC, and she was extremely aggressive. And at least half of the town hall was a debate between her and President Trump. So on one hand, Trump is grilled, is roasted by the moderator, Samantha Guthrie. On the other hand, Biden is given a pass by Stephanopoulos. I mean, to me, this just shows if anybody had any doubt out there how compromised the media is and how politicized the media is, this should have shown proof positive that this is what's going on. They have agendas, they're taking sides, they're promoting or condemning candidates of their choice, and they're not really acting as disinterested arbiters or as reporters asking important questions and pressing for an answer the way you're supposed to be taught in journalism school, the way it used to be at one time. That's all gone now. And this shows how information more and more is not only hard to get, but is being controlled. It is a disgrace.
Well, you got the coddling with Biden and you got the bashing with Trump. I think the questions posed by the audience to Trump was something like 8 to 10 questions, while the moderator posed like 41 or 43.
Yeah,
I forget the exact numbers, but
yeah,
some ridiculous amount.
yeah,
So obviously, there was a back and forth between Trump and the moderator more than anything else.
yeah. And again, between Stephanopoulos and Biden, the glaring omission was no question at all about the New York Post alleged expose on Biden's son arranging a meeting between his dad, who was a sitting vice president at the time, and a Burisma official who wanted to curry favor with the vice president and the Obama administration. Do we have a shot of that headline from the New York Post, which
Yeah.
came out a few days ago, and it was quickly suppressed by Twitter and by Facebook, and they were shutting down sites, including the White House press secretary's site, not allowing that story to get out. I mean, this is what is going on. The media are really cheerleaders for their favored candidates. They are not objective reporters. And if anybody had any doubt that that's the case, this was proof for it between these two town halls that were broadcast simultaneously.
Do you actually think they were live, especially for Biden?
Well, I mean, they were supposed to be live. I mean, I have no indication that they were not live. But
Well, see, I was thinking, like, what would be the excuse other than it was pre-recorded uh, for the no Hunter Biden question from Stephanopoulos?
well, I mean, he wasn't going to ask it, and the people who are supposedly regular voters, regular citizens with no axe to the grind, I'm sure that that was screened ahead of time that question not be asked. So there was no reason really to tape it ahead of time. They already had it under control. Something else interesting now. They're claiming that the town hall with Biden was watched much more than was the one with Trump. Now, I have a theory about that, just a theory, but I'm thinking that at least an element of the lopsided rating there was that there were a lot of Trump supporters that were tuning in on the Biden town hall because they were waiting to see how he performed, and a lot of them, I suppose, were hoping that he would stumble and make a fool of himself. So I think some of that increased viewership for the Biden town hall was really Trump people looking in on it. I myself was looking at the Biden town hall because I was wondering how he was going to perform considering the questions about his cognitive abilities. So I think at least that was a factor in the increased ratings for the Biden town hall over the Trump town hall. Of course, nobody is saying that. They're just claiming that many more people were supportive of Biden and more interested in Biden than they were in Trump.
And my only reason for watching Biden was for what you just said, to see how bad he was going to mess up.
Yeah,
I think he did pretty well. However, he did make up a few words along the way. I mean, words that had no meaning. I caught it. I don't know if you caught it.
yeah. I mean, a lot of it was so vaguely worded, and again, Stephanopoulos should have asked for a clarification. Well, what do you mean by that? And he just gave him a pass on that. I mean, one of the things he said was when Stephanopoulos was pressing him to some extent about whether he was going to tell the voters about how he felt about packing the Supreme Court before the election, Biden's response was yes, depending on how they handle this. So what does that mean? Is he or isn't he going to disclose how he feels about packing the Supreme Court before the election? And Stephanopoulos just let that drift away. One thing after another. There was no real information there.
I was very disappointed in the whole interview.
And again, Rack, as we've talked before, this shows that you can't get the straight story or much real information or extraction of information from the candidates through the networks and through the cable TV stations. So what had been left until recently as an alternative for information was the internet, where there was a lot of wild stuff on there, still is, but a lot of it, at least you have a choice of drifting through a lot of different sources, some crackpot stuff, other stuff that has more credibility, but you had at your disposal a number of sites to go to and try to ferret out the information from that. But now that's being suppressed, and the algorithms have changed, so it's hard to get information that doesn't conform to the mainstream media narratives. And you know quite a bit about that.
Well, Jack Dorsey just backpedaled a bit recently about the suppression of the Hunter Biden story.
Jack Dorsey being the CEO of Twitter.
Correct.
Yeah.
And but I don't see much action being taken to reverse much of what was done.
Yeah, and so anyway, the senators are talking about dragging them before a committee for an explanation, and they may do the same thing with Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, where something has to be done to prevent them from controlling the information as they do with these sites that are really monopolies. That they control most of the information that the public gets. Yeah, so I mean, this is how important this issue is. As I've said, Facebook and Twitter and other social media sites, to a lesser extent, are controlling over 90% of the information now that the public gets. It's a disservice to America in general, and it certainly flies in the face of the First Amendment, even though they're using the excuse that these are private corporations, so they could do whatever the heck they want to do, which is true so far. But as we've discussed before, there may be ways of breaking them down, either breaking them up because they're monopolies or instilling some kind of governance of the law where it's defined, these sites are defined as public forums, and therefore they have to allow a free flow of information. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen in terms of the public finding out anything, especially anything that goes against what the government or special interests want to reveal.
Well, when you talk about these people like Dorsey and Zuckerberg being drugged before a committee, the committee is usually made up of congressmen that, if you take the average, it'd be like 78 years old, and lawyers and stuff, people that are really not technically proficient, that don't really quite get what Twitter is and what Facebook is and so forth. So this has already been done before. These people have already been drugged up before a committee and spoke, and basically as far as I'm concerned, lied right to their face.
Well,
They were questioned about whether they do any censorship, especially regarding conservatives, and they came straight out and said no. So, I mean, like, what are they going to lie again and drag them up again, have them lie again and go
well,
their own way?
well, hopefully this will be a wake-up call. And don't forget, some of the younger senators and other political figures are bringing this to the fore, and maybe even the old codgers that are among the senators will wake up to this and be enlightened as to how pervasive and how destructive this is. Also, I noticed that once Facebook and Twitter prevented the story from being reposted, I checked the Drudge site. Now, as you know, Drudge was always a pretty conservative site, pumping up conservatives, very critical of Clinton and the Democrats in general. In the last couple of months, it's almost been a complete turnaround on that. Now they seem to have joined the progressives and the liberals. And I looked on the site after this came up about the censorship by Facebook and Twitter, and Drudge it wasn't in big headlines the way he'd usually banner something of this momentous effect on the public, but instead it was a small line below the fold, so to speak. It wasn't at first; it was in red. Then later, the red was removed, so it's hard to even register with the public, which I think was the intent. Then, as you know, Drudge also carries a whole list of other publications, other sites, including the Daily Mail, the British publication, tabloid, which is very aggressive and very sensational, but they do come out with stories and information that you can't get stateside here. So I looked on, I went to Drudge, then I went down their list of publications, Daily Mail, and I click on that, and lo and behold, even Daily Mail didn't have anything on it. So to me, it appeared that Drudge was controlling the content of Daily Mail, which is, an incredible thing that I mean, you could see how orchestrated this was. It was a coordinated effort to prevent that story from coming out 3 weeks before the election. A story that can prove that the sitting vice president of the United States running for the presidency was lying about contacts among himself, his son, and a Burisma official. And yet, it's getting no play, or very little play, or buried in the mainstream media.
When we say, conspiracy people say, that the media is controlled, especially it's controlled by 6 corporations, and we try to sort of shake people and say, this is all controlled. Now that it comes to the forefront and people start seeing it, they start to marvel. Well, wait a minute, it's controlled. Something's going on here. Well, people have been saying this for 10 years at least,
Yeah.
15, 20 years maybe, that the media is controlled. So to marvel about it, that's one thing. Now, I will say about Drudge, I mean, maybe we should have a moment of silence or play some taps, because something did happen to Drudge. I'm not quite sure what happened, but yes, there is a change.
Yeah, I mean, that's a glaring change because Drudge was always attacking, always going for the big sensational stories, and barely showing on his site. So that indicates something, and the whole thing indicates things that are not good. Without a free press, or without a press where all sides can express themselves and provide information, whether it's accurate, inaccurate, half truth, half lies, but a free flow of that among all these various sides, all these various agendas, the public could reach out, sift through it, and see what they conclude on their own. But this is becoming now a thing of the past. And where are we headed from here? 1984.
Well, what you can't do anymore, I don't think, is to look to CNN and MSNBC and CBS and ABC. I think you just got to start looking towards Alex Jones, Mark Dice, Tim Pool. There's a whole plethora of smaller people that don't have agendas, that aren't controlled, that try their best to do news. And this may be where you might be able to get it if they're not censored, but they are being censored.
Well, I know you're big on some of these sites, especially Alex Jones, and I have my reservations about Alex Jones, although I have said and still maintain that despite a lot of his inaccuracies and a lot of his hype, he does get information out accurately that can't be found anywhere else at times. So in itself, that's very valuable. But I wouldn't necessarily take everything on Infowars, Alex Jones, at face value. But
Well,
again,
here's the thing. Here's one example. Like somewhere around 10, maybe even 15 years ago, Alex Jones was talking about this strange guy that nobody knew, Jeffrey Epstein, and that Jeffrey Epstein had an island where he had this plane called the Lolita Express, and very prominent people would go there and do all sorts of nefarious things. Now, I remember this.
and
So
it's
I remember I would even tell people about it and talk about it, and people are like, what the heck are you talking? So finally, the news is caught up,
yeah.
10, 15 years later to catch up to where Alex Jones was 10, 15 years ago. So, but there's more examples than just this. I gave you one juicy one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as I say, I don't discount Alex Jones completely, but I approach him cautiously because some of his stuff is very good information that you can't get anywhere else, and some of it is hype and very inaccurate. So you've got to be careful with what you absorb from Alex Jones, but I'm glad he is there as an alternative and is available because there's some information that nobody else has or nobody else is willing to put out to the public, and he does. So that in itself makes him a valuable asset as we try to hold on to and preserve the First Amendment.
Right. Well, you got even someone much more moderate, Tim Pool. Tim Pool, I almost even call him a leftist.
Mm-hmm.
And he tries his best to come out with straightforward, accurate news. If I had to say, is anybody in the alternative media who strives for accuracy, I can't say that anybody who strives more for accuracy than Tim Pool.
If they're able to trim down Facebook and Twitter and other social media dominant platforms, if they're able to corral them, break them up as monopolies, restrain them, constrain them, whatever else, there are already alternative sites out there, but not a lot of people know about them. And a lot of people don't realize that they are there where there is very little, if any, censorship on those sites.
Well, there's no censorship. Alex Jones can talk about whatever he wants to talk about. He's got his own video place, his own website, he's got his own operation. He doesn't even get sponsors.
No, I know,
He
but I
sponsors
mean,
himself.
but you have to get on the Alex Jones. So what I'm saying is there's social media sites that exist right now where there is no censorship or very little of it, so you're able to get much more things on there than you can with the conventional social media sites such as Facebook and Twitter.
Right, there are smaller ones, yes. The trouble is they're echo chambers, most of them. There's an alternative to Twitter, but mostly that is all conservatives that got kicked off Twitter. They moved over to the alternative. It's an echo chamber. If you're going to try to regain the minds of people in this country, if you want to inform people, well, then you're going to want to inform the other side, or at least as best as you can. Because the other side knows what they know, the left knows what they know, the right knows what they know, and if they never meet, then we have a complete division that's never going to end.
So you're saying
There must be discussion.
you're saying that there is currently no other alternative sites where that is completely censorship free, that they're all echo chambers for one side or the other?
I didn't say you can't push it to the extent that they're all echo chambers or they're extreme echo chambers. They just sort of tend to be that way. Tend. Let's just say the word tend. You have Twitter, which if they keep censoring and blocking and banning conservatives, all you're going to have is a left view on Twitter. That's all that's going to be left. And as far as one alternative of Twitter is Gab. They also have Parler and others, but let's just say that those are the ones that already got disenfranchised from Twitter, if not banned from Twitter. and they went elsewhere. And those ones are predominantly conservative views. So yeah, we're splitting into echo chambers. And what the echo chamber used to exist within Twitter, now it's existing or it's beginning to grow where Twitter is one way and something else is another way, and it's going to be a mess.
So where is this all going? Can we be saved?
Well, the censorship has to stop. I don't know how it's going to be stopped. Trump tried an executive order that doesn't seem to have gone very far. Congress is talking again about pulling people in, talking. Who knows where this is going to go? But absolutely, something has to be done, perhaps on a regulatory level. I mean, that's probably the only way that this is going to change is that some sort of hardball regulation comes in and stops this.
And the public has to howl about this. The public has to really get enraged about it and put the feet to the fire of their elected officials. People have to become extremely vocal about this.
Well, here's the thing: the people on the right will howl about it. They will champion the First Amendment. Let everybody speak their mind. Let everybody talk the way they want to talk. However, the people on the left, which seem to have the most voice because they're allowed on platforms and so forth, those are the ones that say, oh, this is hate speech. We got to cut this guy out. We got to ban this guy. We got to get this guy off here because he's saying this bad thing. They're all PC. You have to be ultimate PC, politically correct. That's the left. So they're not going to champion the First Amendment. The only people that can champion the First Amendment are people on the right. And unfortunately, they are the ones getting banned and pushed aside.
Yeah, but also, a word of caution here. Although the right may be more agitated about this now because they are the ones being suppressed more than any other persuasion, you can't let them dominate and have their own echo chamber and exclude information contrary to what they think is in their best interest. In other words,
nobody on the right will back away from a debate. Nobody on the right will say to someone on the left, well, don't talk to me about this. You're offending me. It's not going to happen. Only the left talks that way.
No, look, for instance, like Fox, they're an alternative to especially MSNBC and CNN and all that, but they also put out selective information to shape their own narrative. All sides do it. This is what I'm saying. So is there an alternative, or is there an alternative that could emerge from this with proper legislation that doesn't in itself chip away at the First Amendment? I don't know where this is all going, and I think it's undetermined at this point. However, there's one refuge until it's taken off the air that you could turn to, and that is Rack and Larry. What do you think?
There you go.
All right, Rack, good session. Until we meet again, we will see all of you out there once again. Stick with us. Take it easy.